Our next presenter is Brian Ettling. Brian Ettling is from St. Louis, Missouri, USA. He has worked as a seasonal park ranger at Crater Lake National Park in Oregon for the last 24 years. While working at Crater Lake, he personally witnessed the impacts of climate change. He currently spends his winters in St. Louis, organizing on climate change as the co-leader of the St. Louis chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, and as coordinator of Missouri Citizens Climate Lobby. He also engages Conservative Fellow St. Louis residents as a member of his local Toastmasters club. Brian will give a version of the speech he gave to his fellow Toastmasters in April 2016. Hey USA, let's win the clean energy race. This speech was a response to the American argument we should not take any action on climate change until China cleans up its pollution. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Ettling.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay? Well, wonderful. Well, I'm going to be talking about clean energy here in a moment. But what Kathy wanted me to start out talking about was my personal story. As was mentioned here before, I'm actually originally from St. Louis, Missouri, and growing up in St. Louis. So I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and I always dreamed of seeing other parts of the world and living elsewhere. So when I graduated from college, I needed a job. I had this degree in business administration, and so I went to work at Crater Lake National Park in Southern Oregon for the summer, and I fell in love with it out there. Lynn, who's here in the audience, he grew up at Crater Lake there also, and I worked with his parents, Michael and his mother, Robin, there also. So what happened was that Crater Lake has always just been a summer job for me, so I needed a different job to work in the winter. So Crater Lake, but before I get to the Everglades here, anybody here been to Crater Lake National Park besides Lynn or my wife, Tanya? Ross has been there also. Deepest lake in the United States. It's almost 600 meters deep, or 2,000 feet deep. One of the cleanest and purest bodies of water in the world. One of the things I do as a park ranger is I narrate the different ranger programs, including the boat tours. One of the things I do in the boat tours is I'll take a water bottle and I'll unscrew it and dip up some of the water and drink it in front of the boat passengers, just like this. And that Crater Lake water is delicious. And I've been drinking water directly from the lake for years, and as far as I can tell, there's no side effects. So Crater Lake has always been for me a job from May to October. So I had to find a different place to work at in the winter. So I worked at Everglades National Park in South Florida, where I was very fortunate to lead ranger talks there. And I even got to lead canoe trips. I got to canoe out in the Everglades and see the alligators, crocodiles, manatees, and dolphins and birds. But when you're leading ranger talks, people expect park rangers to know everything, don't you? Oh yeah, you expect when you ask that ranger a question, he better know the answer. So people started asking me about this global warming thing, and I knew nothing about it. Well, like any kind of teacher or ranger, what do? We run to the nearest bookstore or library, try to learn about it. So what I did is I went to a nearest Miami bookstore and I bought this book called Laboratory Earth, The Planetary Gamble We Cannot Afford to Lose, by the late climate scientist Dr. Stephen Schneider of Stanford University. And this book was a good eye-opener for me, and I got hooked reading on climate change. I could not stop reading about it. And so what happened was that I quickly learned that Everglades is in serious danger. The sea level rose 8 inches in South Florida in the 20th century, which is faster than it had in previous centuries, four times more. But in the 21st century, here's an map of South Florida and the Everglades. Miami would be on your right-hand side. With the melting of Antarctica and Greenland due to climate change, we could have a 3-foot rise in sea level, which would inundate most of the park. And I realize I'm outside the United States, so I put in metrics in here. A 1-meter sea level rise. And that was really scary for me that we could lose most of the park, since the highest part on the park road is about 3 feet above sea level. And so in my spare time as a ranger, I was out canoeing among the wild flamingos that I would see down there, and the alligators and crocodiles. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, we got this beautiful habitat and we could lose this all. And so I felt like I had to give up my winter job in the Everglades, go back home to St. Louis and start talking about climate change. I started talking to my nephew's Boy Scout group, and second grade class and started giving climate change talks. And that's how I kind of stumbled across Citizens Climate Lobby. So I've been involved with Citizens Climate Lobby for about 4 years. And I also got involved with Climate Reality Project. That's how I met Rolly here in the room, and Kathy. Who else here has been involved with Climate Reality Project? I saw a few others of you guys here too. And that's where I got to meet Kathy. I met her in Chicago in 2013. She probably hates this picture. But I had this develop with this friendship with Kathy over the years, and then she encouraged me to come to this conference and speak on this topic here today. So, question for you guys. If you had to guess, which country invested the most money in renewable energy, which is primarily solar and wind, in 2015? Anyone taking guesses? You guys know the right answer, yes. It's actually China. China, and this is in US dollars, invests over $110.5 billion in renewable energy in 2015. That was nearly twice the amount of the United States. The European Union was a little bit better. And then I recently found out that Canada last year, and this is in US dollars, invested $4 billion in renewable energy, which is great, but unfortunately that was down 46% from the year before. So a website that I follow closely, Climate Central, really good website, they had an article in March of this year saying that China and the United States are leading the global boom in wind power. Some interesting stats they had in there. In 2015, China built more wind turbines than any other country. China also in 2015 surpassed the European Union in wind production capacity. And by the end of 2014, China had built enough wind farms to potentially power 110 million Chinese homes. And just to compare the United States to China in this renewable race, in 2015, the United States generated 190 megawatt hours of wind power, which is enough to power about 17.5 million homes. China, on the other hand, generated about 185 million megawatts of wind power. And with that new wind capacity they're adding, they could easily blow past the United States and Canada this year. Blow past. Get that? So that's just in wind, I meant before. What about solar? Well, Fortune magazine in this year said that China is utterly and totally dominating in solar panels. China has emerged as the world's largest market for solar panels in 2015. China has long been the world's largest manufacturer of solar panels. And when you add this together, China is now buying a lot of its own panels. When you add together that they're the largest manufacturer and maker, giving the country dominance in the global solar economy. And so investment banking giant Citigroup, or the third largest bank in the United States, said it has informed its investors that the age of renewables is beginning. And just a month ago, the BBC reported that renewable energy has now overtaken coal as the world's largest source of power capacity, which is also good news here too. So China has every intention of winning this renewable energy race. And Kathy wanted me to make sure that I mention here today that just a report from a month ago from the International Energy Agency determined that China remains the indisputable global leader in renewable energy expansion, representing close to 40%, 2/5 of the growth. So there's a lot. So China is determined to be the leader and is making itself the leader. But yet in the United States, I often hear this argument. We should not take any action on climate change until China cleans up its pollution. Who's heard that argument before from friends and family and neighbors and coworkers? Yeah. So I'm sure you hear it a lot in Canada also. But that argument kind of reminds me of this. It reminds me of the story of this mother making breakfast for her 2 sons that are really hungry. And she's making the pancakes as fast as she can, but the brothers simply have no patience. So the one brother goes, I want the first pancakes. The other brother goes, I want the first pancakes. And they keep arguing until finally the mother goes, if Jesus was here, he would say, let my brother have the first pancakes. And the older brother fumes and he goes, "You be Jesus." So that joke kind of reminds me of if the United States would have said in the 1960s, "We're not going to the moon until somebody else goes to the moon." Or we're not going to be, or if the United States and Canada said, "We're not going to be leaders in clean energy. We'll let somebody else be the leaders in clean energy." When have we not been energy leaders, or leaders? But let's be very honest here. Let's talk about that elephant in the room. Because China does have a problem with pollution. Air pollution in China is now killing up to 4,000 people a day. That's according to Bloomberg News. The average life expectancy in the north part of China has been reduced by 5.5 years, and this is according to CNN. The mayor of Beijing said this in January 2015. At present time, Beijing is not a livable city. Boy, that's a selling point for tourism, isn't it? And China Daily, the largest English language newspaper in China, once said that they had this editorial criticizing the government, saying that the Chinese government's inaction in the face of heaviest air pollution in a month flies in the face of their own promises and their own credibility. So there's a lot of internal pressure in China to clean up their pollution. And this was from the New York Times from this year. Statistics from China say the coal consumption continues to drop. For 2 years in a row now, coal consumption is now starting to go down in China. They are starting to bend the curve down. And the president of China has said since 2010 that green and sustainable development represents the trend of our times. So China has every intention to beat North America in this race. And each and every one of us should be concerned about that. I like what my friend Bob Inglis said. Anybody here has heard of Bob Inglis? Conservative Republican. He served in South Carolina. He prided himself of serving the reddest district in the reddest state, being very, very conservative. Well, he decided to go out in a stand and be a brave leader. That climate change is real, and he got voted out in a primary. He got what's called primaried out. And in one of his last addresses to Congress, this is what he told his fellow conservatives. He said, quote, "I would suggest to my free enterprise colleagues, especially conservatives, whether you think that climate change is a bunch of hooey, the Chinese don't. They plan on eating our lunch in the next century. They plan on innovating around these problems, selling to us and the rest of the world the technology that will lead in the 21st century. So we may just press the pause button for several years, but China is pressing the fast forward button." Bob went on to say this: as a result, we may wake up several years from now and say, geez, that just did not work out very well for us. So in the United States, we want to be number one. You know, we enjoy dominating in like the Summer Olympics and being such a great leader in business and innovation and having Lady Gaga, being a leader in the world. And of course, there's a lot of pride in Canada too for Canadian hockey. And I grew up with my favorite rock group being Rush here too. So there's a lot of pride in Canada. So we want to be a great place to live, both of our countries here. So I like what my friend Scott Mandia said about this. He's a professor of meteorology of physical sciences at Suffolk County in Community College in New York. Scott once said that, and this is about the United States, but we're going to expand this to North America. Scott said that North America is great because when we are faced with a challenge, especially with a threat, we collectively take action, and we usually do quite well. The energy revolution is akin to the internet revolution. I want America to take the lead. If we do, we create jobs, sell product to China instead of buying them. We have cleaner air and water and greater national security. And the money savings, or the energy savings, puts money directly back in the pocket. So I like what he says. I love this analogy Scott Vincent says. He says, imagine it is the Olympics and the event is the clean energy race. The U.S. and Canadian track teams have always won these big events before, and it appears to be in great shape to win again. However, after the starting gun is fired, the American runner and the Canadian runners are just jogging while China, India, and the others are sprinting. Don't you want North America to win? There is still time for it to step it up, but the window of opportunity is getting shorter every year because she is falling farther and farther behind. So Scott likes to ask this question to his American audiences. And it's a great question for our North American audiences. Which would we rather have? China selling renewable products to North America, or North America selling renewable products and technology to China? Well, I think the answer is very clear. Hey, North America, let's win the clear energy race. So that's my talk for you guys here today. Thank you so much for this opportunity.